Not all Democrats disagree. Let's talk about this with two men who know the subject well. The former governor of New York State, Republican George Pataki. He was in office, as all of us remember, on 9/11. And Congressman Joe Sestak, Democrat of Pennsylvania, a retired officer in the U.S. Navy. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks, Wolf.
And Governor, let me start with you. Why do you believe the president and the attorney general made a mistake?
I think this is an outrageous decision, Wolf. What it does is it treats horrible terrorists like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the guy who held up the corner grocery store. It poses an enormous threat to our security. In a civil trial in the city of New York, we are going to have to reveal every source of information we had and how we obtained that information in order to indict these now criminal defendants. We tried it before. We did it after the 1993 bombing. We got convictions, but what happened was we had to give up information, who we knew was in Al-Qaeda, what our sources were, and I have no doubt that the fact that we didn't treat it as a war crime and use military tribunals is one of the reasons we were unable to prevent the attacks of September 11th. Right. You know, I have to tell you, 8 years after the fact, reopening these wounds by bringing these criminals, these murderers, to lower Manhattan is completely the wrong thing.
Well, Congressman, his partner, Governor Pataki's partner in 9/11, the former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, agrees completely. He says this is going back to the pre-9/11 mentality. What say you?
Well, I was stationed at the Pentagon when 9/11 happened. Right after that, I took over the Navy's anti-terrorism unit, where we shaped the policies to pursue Al-Qaeda. I went on the ground early in that war, then did the retaliatory strikes of the aircraft carrier battle group, all to getting these perpetrators of this outrage to justice. How can we even think about letting terrorists force us to abandon our principles, keeping them in a black hole away from the rule of law? I defended this nation because I honestly believed it was not a rule of men, it was a rule of law. What better way to show the resolve of this nation than to bring them to New York City to see how their effort to try to destroy something has risen again, and then to bring them into that court system to show them the strength of America, that the rule of law will show them they were wrong and throw away the keys once they've been brought to justice. It's the right way to do it.
All right. Governor Pataki?
Congressman, thank you for your service, but respectfully, I think your comments are really over the top and completely wrong. We don't hold people in black holes. Congress authorized military tribunals by legislation. We cannot arbitrarily execute or try or convict people. They have rights, but they have rights under military tribunals as terrorists, as war criminals, and this is something that has been a long tradition in the United States. FDR created military tribunals against German soldiers who turned up on these shores, and that was upheld by the Supreme Court. No one is saying don't obey the rule of law, but the long-standing history of this country says we can use military tribunals as part of that legal system.
Yes, Governor, but as you know, the Supreme Court said that those tribunals were wrong. What the Supreme Court said, the rule of law, was that you needed to bring these men before a court which recognized the same types of procedures that civilized people do. So they threw out what Congress did time and again. Now there's a choice. Bring them to a court system in the civilian life, or try again before a military commission. They have the evidence, they said, to throw away the keys by bringing them to a civil.
But Congressman,
so they're trying to do what the rule of law of the Supreme Court said.
But Congressman, some of the detainees at Guantánamo are going to be tried before military tribunals. So the question is, why should some have a military tribunal and others not?
Well, as they well said today, those that will come before the military tribunal were ones that their acts were done overseas. Their acts were one that was done on the battlefield over there. These men, much like when the towers were attempted over 15 years ago to be done, was done here in our homeland. Bringing them there underneath the proper procedures is absolutely the right thing to do. And why risk losing it a third time before the military commission, because we've already lost twice before the Supreme Court?
Congressman, this is absolute nonsense. You set off a bomb in Afghanistan, we can use military tribunals. You blow up the towers and kill 3,000 innocent civilians in New York City, entitled to due process of the law and defense attorneys and publicity and a list of every single witness and every single piece of information we used to try you. That is absurd. If we have informants in Afghanistan telling us who these murderers are, we're going to have to disclose their names. Their lives are going to be at risk, and no one else is going to give us that information. Their position, respectfully, is absurd. We are following the rule of law. We are following military tribunals that are guided by the rule of law, and to not do that horribly jeopardizes the security of the people of this country.
Governor, 2 points. First, you do know well that we can go in camera if we need to, so that we don't divulge that.
In camera means a closed door session.
And what do we need, and why do we fear our court systems being able to do their job? They have done it for over 200 terrorists. They've thrown into jails. Why can't we do it again?
Let me give you one example.
This was an outrage that they've done, and we must throw them into jail because of it.
Let me give you one example. First of all, I don't think we should throw them into jail. I think we should execute them, and I think we have the legal right to do that. I disagree with you on that as well. But let me give you one example. When we tried in civilian courts the terrorists who blew up our embassies in East Africa, we had to reveal the list of every single al-Qaeda person we had identified. Within weeks, Osama bin Laden had that list. He knew who we knew about, he knew who we didn't know about, and he could infer from that what our sources of information was. That was a few years before the attacks on the towers. To do this again is absurdity. Einstein said to repeat the same act and expect a different consequence is the definition of insanity. We tried it before, we got attacked, we lost thousands of civilians. This is the wrong decision.
Governor, you're
and by
wrong,
the way,
you're making... Governor, you're making reaches there that absolutely have no connection between the dots, and you know that.
Okay, well, tell me what they are. Congressman, tell me what those reaches are.
Absolutely, Governor.
Tell me.
Just a moment, please. What we have done is throwing men into that black hole in Gitmo, outside the reach of law. That's not America. Now to bring them into a court system and be able to have the proper safeguards where you don't have to reveal that is absolutely the proper way to go about this. I have great confidence in our judicial system.
How can you say that when the detainees in Guantánamo time and again have been able to do everything from file habeas corpus petitions to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court? Every action at Guantánamo is overseen by our legal and criminal justice system, and you know that. But it's not as though we're putting... You know that they have the right to bring actions, and they have brought them time and again. You also know.
Governor, how do you say when I was on the ground in Afghanistan and saw a detainee be brought in, banging his head against the wall, and I said to the soldier, "What's gives here?" He says, $2,000 bounty. You know, they just gave it to him, some guy with a mental challenge. Ends up in Gitmo, and all of a sudden we're going to keep him here in the rule of law because some tribal chief turned him in, and then years later we let him go back. The rule of law, sir, is what America is founded on. We should basically let it stand and determine things, not a person's opinion or assertions.
You know, let me just read to you, Congressman. Hold on, Governor, for a second, because not only Republicans are being critical of the president's decision today. Democratic Senator Jim Webb of Virginia released a statement that said this in part, and Congressman, I want you to react to it. Those who have committed acts of international terrorism are enemy combatants, just as certainly as the Japanese pilots who killed thousands of Americans at Pearl Harbor. It will be disruptive, costly, and potentially counterproductive to try them as criminals in our civilian courts. That statement from Jim Webb. Go ahead and respond to Senator Webb.
Absolutely. I have great respect for Jim Webb, but we disagree. There is a vacuum in international law of how to define terrorist. We came up with our own combatant alien. And so because of that, they were outside the rule of international law and U.S. law. No one should be outside the rule of law, particularly in the jurisdiction and the hold of America. I believe that. I believe that very strongly, because justice is what we founded this nation upon.
Governor, to you, I want to read a statement that the New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, a man I'm sure you know and admire, issued today in response to this decision by the Justice Department. It's highly appropriate that those accused in the deaths of nearly 3,000 human beings in New York City be tried here, and the NYPD is prepared for the security required. You want to respond to Commissioner Kelly?
I have